Every belief is deeply ingrained in our bodies. The body just operates in a completely different algorithm than our intellectual mind. And oftentimes we don't have an answer, but the body knows somehow. And so I think in coaching, I'm always trying to just guide the person to really tune in, to step into this vessel and see what's going on there.
Welcome to the Purpose Studio. I'm your co-host, Nida Al-Relami. Now, let's get into today's episode. I'm so excited to be speaking to Vanya today. Vanya, if you could give a little bit of your background, tell the audience who you are. I'm ready to start this with you, this conversation.
I'm really excited to be here. So a quick background on me. I'm an executive coach, and I think this is kind of how we connected. We first made contact on LinkedIn and then had a conversation, and this is how we ended up here recording this today. I work with founders, executives, entrepreneurs, CEOs, mostly in the US, scaling companies, and I help them with developing leadership. I help them with really the journey of scaling teams and businesses and navigating interpersonal dynamics and essentially becoming a better leader, building more capacity to lead.
As we mentioned before we started the podcast, I feel like this is extremely important for the Purpose Studio to start off the first season when we're talking about a window into social entrepreneurship and just entrepreneurship in general, is that this inner piece, this inner work is so crucial. I wanted to start from the very beginning. What led you, Vanya, to this unique path of coaching founders and exploring deep inner work and integrating spiritual and somatic practices into leadership?
I have always been interested in inner work. Became really fascinated with philosophy in high school and really dove into the Eastern traditions. I started reading Osho at 17. So it was really an early kind of beginning for me. I really dove in. I wasn't really interested in business or anything at the time. I just really wanted to explore our inner landscape, what actually is happening for us. How do we achieve success? How do we build a life that we truly love? And those were really the questions that I was sitting with at the time. It was just always a very curious human in terms of, the deeper questions of life. Why are we here? Do we have a purpose? What happens when we die? I was just really exploring that in high school. And then I went ahead and studied philosophy, history of philosophy. I studied basically every philosophical tradition. I took psychology and really dove into that work. I always knew I'm not going to be on a corporate trajectory. Basically, building a career in a big corporation just didn't really feel it was my path. I really enjoyed entrepreneurship at the time when I was 22. Entrepreneurship was still a new path for people, and it was very interesting and intriguing. And how come you are charting your own journey and building a company? So it's just really also fascinated by people who kind of build things on their own. And then later on, I moved to the US. I'm from Bulgaria originally, so I grew up there, went to school there, and then I moved to the US when I was 20. And then I started really meeting all these people building companies in tech and got more interested. And the question then was, how do I support them with what I've known so far and what I've learned and all these disciplines that I've taken, and how do I actually integrate them and build something of my own as well? And then I kind of landed into coaching through someone who had hired a coach at the time. They told me everything about it, how transformational and impactful it was for them. And then I looked up coaching and I started researching and really loved the idea of helping someone develop. Right, helping someone deepen their understanding of who they are and what they wanted to build in the world and how. And then I got a bunch of coaching certification and continued to study and deepen that work for myself. And I was in New York at the time, and I just, started meeting people and asking what they needed and started really weaving that work within the journey of what it's like to be a founder, because that's a very unique path with its own unique challenges. And I guess it worked. I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's why I was so intrigued to connect with you on LinkedIn because I am trying to start my own venture right now. And it's really from the space of working with inner peace modalities. I am still trying to find my own authority, my voice in this space. And I didn't know exactly how to frame that or what kind of offering to give people. I knew that I was like interested in founders and entrepreneurs and in that world and tech. That I think this is such an interesting place to still provide my inner peace, soul transformative knowledge that I want to share in a very specific niche audience. Did you feel like you needed more experience or expertise in the tech world or working with startups, or did you already kind of have that background already?
I went straight through coaching with focus on leadership development. I was starting to learn the specific and unique challenges leaders have. However, at the time, I had not worked at a startup. I didn't know, anything in terms of like kind of the inner workings of building a business. But in kind of my first days in New York, and as I was doing my customer development, you may call it, I'm just really asking people what they're struggling with. What are they facing every day? And as I was doing that research, I started to understand more and more what's actually really happening in the company. And then you get lucky because in the beginning, when you're starting something like this, you need a couple people to believe in you and to give you a chance and to be like, okay, come and work with us, right? Come and help us. And so I had a few clients in the beginning and a few companies that really opened their doors for me. And then we started working together and I started really learning what's actually happening within the business. Then later on, I joined a startup and I helped them build their culture and people function. And that also gave me a very much of an insider view of what it's like to scale a business from a people and leadership perspective, specifically because I was brought in to do that. And also saw all the rest of chaos that happens in startups. So that was really important in the beginning. And I'm also an avid reader and I constantly study and learn. And I've read probably every business book that's out there on startups and leadership, also development and mindset and strategic planning and all the things. So I continuously just learn. I've taken courses for corporate governance, for example, to just really understand how boards work, right? Like what is the impact of the board and how you can manage that relationship, because most of those companies at some point will raise money and then they'll have a board and investors that they need to answer to. And that brings a complex dynamic to already a complex and chaotic process of building a company. You just start to really understand what those people need and you start to get more and more resources to help yourself be more impactful and add more value.
Yeah, totally. And I think full entrepreneurial spirit there, you experiment and you just go in and you start to add on the resources, the different modalities and teachings. As you mentioned, when you started to work with your first startup and your first clients, you're working with these tech CEOs, founders, and VC-backed leaders at the highest level. What kinds of patterns did you see constantly, especially in the very beginning in these rooms? And what was also the pushback for some of the things that you were bringing in? Because I'm assuming that, these are different spaces, right? And so a lot of the teachings that you are bringing in might not always resonate with leaders or the team.
Well, I'll address the first part of the question first, which is what do I see in those spaces? It's interesting because there is always a component around relationships, even in the very early stages, right? As you know, these businesses look completely different at every funding stage and every kind of inflection point, but there's that one thread that stays consistent, which is interpersonal relationships. And I think there's always work within that area for anyone that's doing the work that I do, because we build businesses and we create many different things in the world, but they're all through relationships, right? So I believe that is really the core of transformation. If you can transform the relationship with yourself, the relationship with others, business is relational. So it's always been really around dynamics. In the beginning, it could be co-founder dynamics. They're trying to figure out how to set up the business, align on the vision and the end goal. Would we want to IPO? Would we want to sell? Like, what is the ideal exit that we're looking for example, right? Or what kind of people we're hiring? Or there's also sometimes these interesting power dynamics that happen between maybe 2 or 3 co-founders. And, you see again how the relationships are creating friction. And so it's really around helping those people and helping the relationship actually flourish and become open and vulnerable and healthy and progressive versus letting them be in conflict or, play out patterns that perhaps are still unconscious. It's really bringing to the surface and awareness the patterns and the dynamics that are actually happening to help them understand how to better the relationship. And that's a big pattern that I see. The other patterns are around their own insecurities, right? Like, can I actually bring the right people in the business? I want only A players. I'm worried I have maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome. Maybe I'm not fully secure in our go-to-market, what we're actually building. And that shows in my interviews because I can't promise these guys we're going to end. Startups are a lot about bullshitting, to be honest. It's a lot about playing a game that really, it takes a lot from you unless you become really aware of it, right? And intentional about how you build that company and the journey itself. Lots of those dynamics are present throughout the journey. As a company grows, there's other things that start to be more complex. When you start to have investors, as I said, there's like new relationships that you have to manage there. Oftentimes people even get into the parent-child dynamic. You project those early patterns to someone that perhaps has more authority now, investor or your board. And so there's all kinds of different things that come up, but it's really the human, the inner, and oftentimes the unconscious patterns that play out that coaching and this, deeper inner work can actually highlight for people so they can become conscious about them and then figure out how to untangle them or how to navigate them better.
That's so fascinating. Are you familiar with Kabbalah? I started getting into Kabbalah in January. I was always trying to figure out ways that I could better my soul and navigate through life. And so that's kind of how I've always run things, whether that's career, relationships, etc. I saw some videos from David Guillaume. I started in January looking at his videos and I was watching his content every single day. It really started to shift my perspective and mindset. It was the next layer of my spirituality that I didn't even really understand, that I still was stuck in an old way of thinking. And I'm in Paris now, and I really feel like a big shift has started to happen for me just being here. And I found out that he had a seminar here last month. And so I went to it. It was so beautiful to be in that room with 350 people, and he's very successful with his company, Mary Ruth Organics. And so a lot of his conversation was about the energetics of leadership and business and being able to hold that responsibility and that authority as a business owner or an entrepreneur. I think this is exactly what you are speaking about here. It's like oftentimes people, they go in with this entrepreneur founder hat and they go into their team, but they're not even realizing that a lot of the inner child dynamics with their parents start to come up, and also just learning how to communicate and navigate a lot of what they have been programmed to be with their team members. And so it's really important because it's not just adopting the role, it's really adopting the power to hold that or the authority of that. And hopefully people start to resonate with this. I think we're definitely switching into a different perspective as a society that these things are truly important.
This is about capacity. Like we talk about developmental capacity. So when we talk about leadership is a developmental path. Like you're developing as a leader, but what you're actually developing is you're developing a capacity. I like saying with ChatGPT now, we're solving the knowledge problem. Everybody's going to know any answer that of any question that you may ask, like in seconds, right? And I don't think we can obviously compete with that type of intelligence on a strictly head, mental, intellectual level. But then the capacity that you build as a leader is much more than that. It's about how can you hold more of this experience? How can you hold more responsibility? How can you expand your awareness? How can you expand your connection with self? How can you really develop all these different capacities that you have for intuitive insight, for spiritual insight, for emotional insight, right? There's so many other things that leaders need to develop in order to really hold what leadership is. Responsibility of actually charting a path for yourself, but then other people as well. And I think that's a lot. It's more about developing capacity versus filling the cup. It's expanding the cup. It's expanding the container instead of adding more knowledge and listening to more podcasts and more business strategy and more optimization and biohacking and all of that. But it's really about like, can we expand? Can we just become bigger, right? Like in the way that we are in the world.
I think the same thing. I think often in that pause, you really do expand the capacity to hold more. I like what you said. You don't need to be putting more information. Sometimes we all honestly have it intuitively, especially if they've been in it for a very long time, but it's really making the space. And often that's getting rid of all of the excess gunk or thinking or stress that's on us that's not allowing us to expand and hold more. I wanted to get into your Substack because you're such a beautiful writer, and it was really refreshing to see your post on LinkedIn because I just resonated with your energy. I think it's called the Unfolded.
The name of the Substack, yeah.
One of your essays you wrote, you can build a company, raise funding, and have a great outcome and still feel deeply unsettled if you haven't made true self-contact. What does self-contact mean here for you, and why is it so essential for leaders today?
I think self-contact is exactly what we talked about. Like, can I actually connect with myself in such a way that I'm really attuned and aware of my moment-to-moment experience? You know, what is happening internally for me, and the ability to stay with whatever is happening, right? Meaning not go distract myself with having a coffee or more work or in any way disassociate from what I'm experiencing in the moment, but can I be with that? Can I actually find a way to be in contact with everything that's happening with me? It's really that capacity to staying connected to yourself. For example, if you are founder in a session with me today and you explained that you had something going on, let's say just something easy like you're unable to be vulnerable with your team or give feedback with your team. Like there's two ways to approach this. If we were in a super intellectual space, the head space, we can probably talk about different ways to give feedback, language, the formula of how to give feedback, right? Or we can go into, I can guide you into actually making that self-contact. So I might ask you when we talk about giving feedback to your co-founder, like what are you noticing that is arising in your body? And then you may say, well, I feel my chest is getting tighter, or I'm getting like sweaty palms, for example. I will guide you to actually feel into what is happening in the moment when you think about feedback, feel into what feedback is for you. It might be a revealing of an emotional pattern there that you're perhaps afraid to be canceled, or you're afraid to hurt people or to make someone self-conscious about themselves. And that might be a belief that we can uncover under. It might be an emotional connection or some kind of difficult emotion that you're struggling with when it comes to feedback. And really the self-contact is being present to your moment-to-moment experience and being able to draw that wisdom of what's happening in the body right now. And then I'll ask you questions to kind of dive deeper and explore more of what this experience is for you. I may ask you, when was the first time you felt like that? Let's go there if you're open to that. It's really about I be attuned and aware of what's happening inside of me in my day-to-day and moment-to-moment experience, really in short. And there's a lot more that we can go into this because I think that's part of the bigger question of like, do I really know myself, right? Do I know what's happening within me when someone approaches me with a conflicting situation? And do I move away from the conflict? We have those intellectual concepts and understanding of what do we do in those situations, but we never really turn to the body, into the somatic experience, to the emotional experience, and also really the capacity to, as I said, be with yourself, which is, can I build compassion for myself? You know, oh, can I have compassion for the fact that I'm perhaps afraid to give feedback or afraid to go into confrontation? And can I build that relationship again that ties into perhaps working with your inner child if you go into more of a therapeutic approach here? But it really is this notion of myself staying in connection with myself. And if you think about your inner child, for example, and or someone that you're really in deep connection with, how would you be with that being in any situation, whether that's a difficult situation or a positive celebration or whatever it is? That's it.
It's like not running away from the emotions as they arise. I've definitely tried to be more logical, intellectualize these emotions, and rather than experiencing it and just letting, if I felt sadness, to just let the sadness like be felt, even if it was days. I was always trying to run away from those emotions, but now I'm definitely understanding more that by doing that, I was kind of just pushing it deeper down. And by going through it and honoring it and allowing it to arise, I was actually being able to move forward. How do you go through some of these concepts? I know like there's somatic healing. What does that actually mean? And can you talk about any more of those like technical terms or those different modalities that you're using with your leaders or the teams that you're working with?
Not a somatic expert per se. Like I haven't really dove into that work on an extremely deep level as someone who is a somatic coach. But I've been really exploring working with the body because I think the body informs so much of knowledge about the world, right? Like the body can give us so much insight about what's happening. And I think in our culture, we're very much stuck in the head. Like when you even think about, we have a head office, we have headquarters, we have the head of the business, we have the head of the table, even, so we use that term head everywhere. And so I think in our society, we lead with the head. It's like the thing that gets put on a pedestal. We intellectualize. We even talk about who's the smartest person in the room. And so that's kind of on a pedestal, I think, in our society. And when we talk about integration and how can we actually draw information and wisdom from other aspects of what's available to us, and the body being one, we actually start to move the focus from the head to maybe heart, gut, and just really what's arising in the body. And I think the body holds all the patterns. The body, this is the nervous system. Every belief is deeply ingrained in our bodies. And so if we actually dove in more, we would find out so much of perhaps the things that we can't really conceptualize because you can't. The body just operates in a completely different algorithm than our intellectual mind. And oftentimes we don't have an answer, but the body knows somehow. And in coaching, I'm always trying to just guide the person to really tune in, to step into this vessel and see what's going on there, whether that's a quick meditation to open the session. I used to do a lot of holotropic breathwork with clients specifically as well. Holotropic breathwork is a modality in a way of breathing. It's a specific pattern of breath that induces altered state of consciousness, obviously without anything that is altering your state outside of just your breath, right? But it really puts you in a different state. Some call it flow state. And it really helps the body release energy, release stuck emotions. It's an emotional release. It is helpful for, just a reset. It's not necessarily a tool to heal trauma. You need a lot more work, but it is a really good opening to what the body holds. And most recently in my own personal journey, I have been getting more and more interested in the body, functional patterns, right? Why do we hold tension in some parts of our body? So I've started to do a lot more body work. I'm working with an osteopath. I go to a chiropractor, and just really want to understand the functional patterns of the body, because those patterns also lock in through sometimes emotion, through tightening, right? Through tension, where we hold tension in our bodies, that's a contraction. It's something closing and something kind of being pressured. And so can we release? Can we open the body? Can we actually have energy flow within our body without obstruction, which is oftentimes knots and places in our body where we compensate. Functional patterns is also just really understanding how you even walk in the world, your posture. And that has everything to do with also nervous system, even I believe with moods, right? And, anxiety. If something in your body is constantly pressuring you and you're feeling this like low level of stress that's there all the time because you have back pain or whatever, that would impact so much of your state, even without understanding that, even without like consciously knowing, because we think like, oh yeah, everybody has back pain or everybody has some kind of pain in the body, which I don't think it's normal. And so like I'm personally now on a journey to really understand what's happening in the body on a deeper level. And it's just a whole, I think, field of exploration that will probably take me a lot of time, because there's the fascia that keeps lots of stored memory and emotion, and it's fascinating. And I don't think we explore much. We go to a massage in New York when you're working a crazy job and you're in finance or whatever. Yeah, you go to the Chinese place, get a massage. But that's not even touching the depth of what you can do with your body and just really release and open, and how transformative that could be.
So crazy how the body's so connected to all of these different parts. But also, I think what you're saying, for example, I did Kundalini for 7 months, one period of my life. And when I went into practice this type of yoga, I wasn't fully aware of the benefits until after. And everyone was talking about it, but I was still very scared of these types of things. I was not really open to spirituality or even self-development. It was very early on. But after 7 months of doing that and doing the breath work and moving, I realized that I was learning a new way to release my anger and frustration. I've always been a really intense runner, but Kundalini was using breath work to kind of release that and detox the organs. And it really did start shifting things in my reality as well. I started to be more creative. I started to have more confidence to say what I wanted to say. Like, all of these things are so unexplainable, but you do start to see what it could do for you. Do you see sometimes from maybe early on when you're working with leaders or CEOs, when you first start coaching them and then going through the different modalities, do you see them start to shift into maybe a different identity or presence, or hold themselves in a different way? I would imagine, just thinking about starting off on this entrepreneurship journey, there's a lot of things I had to step into energetically. Maybe being more self-conscious in my speaking before, and then having to really assert myself in a type of energy that, like a 2.0 version of it. I think working with execs at this level, you start to see that shift in them.
Thankfully, the people that I work with, my clients, are super open to this work, and that's why they're in it. And I think it's beautiful to have a session and to see the person coming in next session and telling you, what's shifted and how they've navigated a conversation in a completely new way, or how they feel more powerful in their bodies and just in the way that they assert presence, leadership presence. And I mean, sometimes this journey is so hard. Sometimes people go into periods of time where things are really not going well, and you have to help them keep a certain belief system intact, right? To continue to move on. And I've seen, this transition from like founder barely making payroll, right? And having his health being affected, and like a few sessions, like he comes back and he's completely changed the trajectory of what he's doing and how he's doing things, and now feeling not only better, but like he's also made changes within the company, fired somebody that wasn't really great for the role, and or there's so many kind of real world outcomes that happen. But I'm always more interested in what you're saying. How do they actually shift and transform into different people? And that, that doesn't happen overnight. It happens with sessions and integration, and you may plant some seeds in a session, and then 2-3 sessions later, which is usually 2-3 weeks, or maybe even 4-6 weeks if we're meeting every 2 weeks, right? Depending on the schedule. But you see in the future how they come in with a different set of beliefs, with a different mindset about things, with a different presence in the room or even in the session. You can sense that. And so that's beautiful. And I think we need more spaces where founders can step into that type of transformation. Coaching is one way. I'm doing a retreat now that I'm really excited about, an in-person experience, which I think are much more impactful because it happens in a short period of time, right? It's kind of like an intensive. It's beautiful to see people really making new choices.
I want to hear more about this retreat that you are putting on.
It's September. It's in Portugal. I am in Portugal right now, in Lisbon. So I'm really loving it so far. Lisbon is a beautiful city. There's also an ecosystem here. One of the people that is coming to the retreat yesterday, he's an SF-based founder, told me like that might be the SF of Europe. There's even a bridge and there's hills and it's beautiful. But yeah, the retreat will be here outside of the city. It is in September 9 to 14. It is a completely different format than any other leadership retreat that really exists out there. I don't think anybody else is really doing that work. I'm bringing an incredible therapist, a woman that has changed my life, that I now call a teacher, and I'm taking a lot more teacher trainings with her. And so just super excited to bring her in. And we're going to focus on that, like inner transformation, inner work, helping founders really connect with who they are, make that self-connection, a self-contact that we talked about, and really understand what is that next chapter for them. A lot of people would come to this retreat post selling their business. It's almost like this identity reconstruction of who am I? Like, what made me the leader that I am today? What are the belief systems, the coping mechanisms, the patterns of behavior, the patterns of my body, like nervous system, like all of the things, the package that actually has shaped who I am today, and then creating the space to envision who that person would be in that next chapter, right? Understanding themselves better. Inquiry, there's going to be lots of just personal work, therapy informed, constellation systemic work informed, which is also beautiful insights based modality to facilitate that inner knowledge of where you are, why you are like that, why do you tend to do XYZ, and can you untangle those, and what's actually more beneficial and supportive for you for what you want to design next. And it's only for people in a leadership position, those people who carry a lot, who carry the responsibility for people, for capital, for what they're building in the world, and really give them the space to actually look within and take care of themselves, because oftentimes the biggest challenges are theirs to solve. If there's a complex problem, most likely no one else will be able to solve it in the business but the CEO. Like the most challenging things actually end up on the CEO's desk. And so it's a very unique journey, and oftentimes they're running, scaling the business, building the business, no time for them, always a compromise, always a sacrifice, always something that they need to do, and it's all on them. And so there's those stories that kind of constantly run in founders' heads. And I just really wanted to create space for them to actually really take care of themselves and reflect and inquire, and then come out much more confident, much more in their power, and really understand who they are as a leader. It's an identity question, it's a success question, it's purpose question. All of those big leadership questions are really going to be what we're diving in September.
You brought up a lot about identity, and I really wonder, on the flip side, the people who maybe their company goes bankrupt or they lose that position, those people that are struggling with identity in that sense, where this is all they've ever known themselves to be, right? A CEO or an executive founder. Have you worked with clients or leaders that have gone through this kind of shift of identity?
I think that's a very common challenge, especially because a lot of founders, they drop out of school, right? And then start a business. And then they work on this business for, I don't know, 5, 7, sometimes 10 years, right? Long period of time. And then when the business sells or fails or whatever ending happens, it's really hard for them to kind of anchor in to who they really are, because that's all they've known, to your point. And oftentimes this journey is so demanding that you don't have the time, and you're not prioritizing really getting to know yourself. You're prioritizing the business. And so you go through this identity crisis at some point, because you just never taken the time to really understand who is the person under the roles, the responsibilities, what you need to be for everybody in this business and for your customers. And so it is a challenging journey. And I think I'm actually working with someone right now who is a very young founder, and he's very aware of that. We had a call, and he was sharing how he's feeling that the work and the role is consuming everything. And he used to listen to music, he used to love photography and all of these things, and now he just is disconnected from that. And we're working through that, because it's an interesting path. And if you become more conscious and intentional about it, you can preserve not only who you are, but also continue to discover who you are on that journey. And I think business and building a business could be a transformative personal path, right? It could be a transformation, just like a relationship is, right? Just like marriage could be. It's I think an opening to deeper work, right? If you take it like that, it could be an opportunity for real spiritual growth, building a business. But not many people look at it like that. But if you do, then that process can be, as you're building a company, you can also be getting to know yourself better, getting to know your patterns if you're doing that work, and essentially getting to know who you really are, right? And there are ways to do that. There are ways to actually step back, but people get in this pace of, I need to listen to the next business podcast and read the next business book and this and that. And I just have no time to actually step back and regulate and really connect with myself. But actually, from that place, you become more innovative, more relaxed, more anchored, or, build more confidence. Because if you're constantly externalizing and gathering information, you don't give a chance for yourself to really connect with your inner wisdom. And there's so much there that you can trust. There is a way, and everyone's struggling with this. Most founders that I know. Even, I don't know if you saw the founder of Loom, one of them, they exited to another big company, Atlassian. And he wrote a little essay. He wrote in his blog how he just doesn't know who he is. And he's going through this transformation. He broke up with his girlfriend and sold the company. And now he's really wealthy and he doesn't know what the next step is. He's really going through this period of what is going on with me and who am I? And because they've been building for 10 years and it's like really heads down. If you actually know that, and if you can anticipate that, you can take the steps to actually do that work alongside with building the business.
That's so fascinating. My work for what I'm building is called Peace Lab. I studied peace building. There's all this reflective process that has to happen before you can be a peace builder and help community and create an impact. And that's what really resonated with the field and discipline for me, was that I was like, oh yes, of course, we need to make sure that we have self-development and take care of ourselves before we step into a community as an expert or for an intervener. I'm trying to figure out how to bring that concept to people who are like in their mid 20s to early 30s, who are kind of experiencing this loss of hope or purpose, or they're going through a career transition, they've been laid off and they're feeling very lost. And a lot of the customer interviews that I'm doing, it's really like kind of devastating, because I think especially with our political and economic climate right now, people are feeling this sense of, what is the purpose of life? I don't really know what to do. So I'm basically seeing it in my own little world right now of that question, identity. And I feel very blessed because my career path has led me to exposing all of the places where I was actually trying to hold on to titles, a job position. I wasn't given that automatically, even though I had the hard work ethic, even though I was put in the right rooms, even though I was very curious and intelligent, I was not being presented any of those opportunities because I think there was a part of my ego that was still trying to take from it for validation and security. And so I feel blessed to be at this point where I'm saying, okay, I established identity outside of all of these things. And now here's some tools that I learned, and my life experiences shape me from that. Just to go back to this, I think it's a superpower to find identity outside of all of these things, whether that's your title, how much money you're making, or which city you're in, or any of these things that we add on just for comfort. We don't even realize we're doing it. When people come to this moment of going back to the drawing board and saying, I have a white canvas, what do I do with my life? Even though I've had all this success, it's such a beautiful time if people change that perspective and look at it this way, that I have more power not identifying with this past anymore. As a coach, what are some of the insights or experiences that have really shaped your own spiritual practice and your own inner healings?
For better or for worse, I have had multiple experiences that have shaped my journey with personal work. And to your point, it's important to do that work as a practitioner when you're holding space for other people, when you are helping others to get to know themselves and get to the essence of who they are. And the question is, what happened and how are you doing that, right? And for me, as I said, many, many things. I think the first thing that really put me on that path was my family. There was a lot of rupture in my family as I was growing up. It brought me to this place of really questioning why is this happening? Like, what is going on really? Like, why is my family not finding its balance or harmony? And we're going through these difficult situations, and essentially my parents divorced, and it was hard when I was like growing up because of my father. And I think that was maybe the first kind of opening for me to start to do my own work and to start to explore how the family is impacting me, the family dynamics, and how did I become who I was based on what happened in my family. And I think the biggest thing was for me when I kind of saw that I'm not in a family that I can really count on, right? I felt like kind of on my own. So I think I still remember writing in my journal. I think I was probably 16. or 17, and I had started my first summer job, and I was, making money for myself and saving and starting to really kind of find my own independence. And I was writing in my journal, wow, my family actually did their job. I'm healthy, educated, I have a roof over my head, I have food, they've done their job. Like, it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter that they're not going to be able to support me in the future in the way that maybe I've imagined or wanted to or had expectations for, right? They've done their job. Their parenting is over. I'm an adult now. I'm turning 18 in like a couple of years or whatever. And I can take it on my own now. I can start to build a life on my own terms. And I think that empowered me a lot. Just kind of that shift of, hey, I'm on my own now. Like, what do you want to do? Like, how do you want to live this life? How do you want to design this experience for yourself? And, you're good. You don't need anything from them anymore. Like, you're an adult. I think that was like a really powerful moment for me to really kind of take my life in my own hands and separate myself and establish myself as my own human being. So that was, I think, just the first big thing that kind of put me on the path. It started helping me reframing everything that was happening to me, that it was actually happening for me. Right? All of those difficult situation and rupture that happened in my family actually made me who I am today and who I was then. It empowered me, I think, created this interesting goal orientation and independence that I needed to build. I moved to the US when I was 20 with $500 and like started a new life by myself. I didn't know anybody there. I'm a woman. I feel like it was really empowering to really step into that type of independence. I've transformed that and transitioned to like a different way of operating, but that was really helpful for my early 20s, to be focused, goal oriented, and create. And then the path continued, right? As I was studying meditation and philosophy and psychology and all of that, I was continuing to also explore and excavate, what's happening within me and my patterns and all of that. And I think the second really big kind of turning point, and then the process continues, right? And then you have another escalation of things and you're like, oh my God, like what is happening? And that brings you even deeper into the next layers of the peeling of the onion was like 2 years ago. Exited a relationship, and I think that process of that period really deepened more and more my journey around, again, like really doing the fundamental work, attachment styles, childhood developmental trauma. What am I still carrying from the 0 to 7 years old? Because all of those things essentially show up in relationship, intimate, but then also in relationships with people. It could be also in your work, like all these different patterns and triggers and wounds essentially that were created back in the day that are not healed yet would get triggered over and over again in social situations until we see them. And this relationship for me was a catalyst for probably the deepest healing that I went in. And through that process, I met the woman that I'm working with today, Ellie. Her and I connected and she supported me on my journey. And I still say to this day that she's truly transformed my life. Her work is really unique. She's a trained therapist and she helps you look into that process of deconditioning from childhood, which is, maybe you've heard of Hoffman in the US. There's the Hoffman process. It's a huge week retreat, which people say it's the most difficult personal work that you can enter. And so Ellie does something very similar called primal therapy, which is the same format. It's 5 days. And you go in and you decondition. Essentially, you explore the relationship with mother and father, how it affected you. And that's everything. That is the foundation of how we build our lives, how we build our relationships, how we make decisions. All of our deeply ingrained patterns happen and ingrained themselves from 0 to 7. And then the other thing that she does is family constellations, which is this other exploration of what happened in the family lineage and the ancestral line that you're still carrying, that there's still loyalties, there's trauma gets passed down generation from generation. So it's very important to look into the system that you're coming from, a family system. The family system has its own rules and ways of existing and dynamics that are super interesting to explore. And so her work is really a combination between childhood developmental healing and deconditioning and looking into the family. And so family constellation work, which is incredibly fascinating. It's super rooted in, well, in the psychological, in the world of psychology, it's still, there are people that are not fully behind this work, but in my experience, it has been the most transformational work. It does have a big spiritual component. It works with the field. The biggest thing is it uncovers hidden dynamics that you just don't know about. And then you see them played out in the field, and it's just incredibly insightful and incredibly healing. And yeah, and then the journey continues on. So I would imagine that I'll be doing more and more work, and more things would open up for me as, you live life, and when you have kids, and they bring so much to the healing process as well, because there's triggers, and now there's like another generation that you maybe passing down the things that you didn't heal and take a look at. So it's a beautiful journey. It's difficult, but I think that's the way. You have to dive into the most difficult work, which is that work, to be also able to hold space for people. And I don't know who said this, but it's a huge line. You can take people places that you haven't gone yourself. So continuing to explore, continuing to deepen, continuing to heal. And we all are kind of on the same boat, whether or not we know it. Some people are not so aware of what's happening and think they have no trauma or anything. And I'm not talking about the trauma that we may think is the definition of something really hard happening to you, but trauma could just be you were separated from your mother as a baby because you got sick and you needed to go to a hospital when you were there for a week. And then that could be a very traumatic experience for a baby being separated from the mother. Even that is considered a traumatic experience. So like that's what I'm referring when I'm saying like we all have stuff that affect us in ways that we are yet to discover, and hopefully we will discover, so that we can show up differently for ourselves and our children and the people that we interact with.
It's so beautiful. I think you said it never really stops, this inner work, personal journey, but it's not something to be afraid of or scared of or even resent, because it just goes back to show that this life is really just a test, and we are all facing our own unique challenges, and it's to refine our souls and how we're supposed to show up in the world, and allowing everything that comes in to show us more of what we need to heal to be a better version of ourselves. And so I know it's easier said than done, because when you're going through it, you're like, why is this happening to me? And we become like all this victim mindset around it. But it's really just kind of like pausing and reframing situation, and trying to see the highest light from it, because it's always for the best. I can't wait to even think about like how to get deeper into my own soul transformation. I told you that I was doing Kabbalah right now, but there's so much to impact and to know and have an intimate relationship with yourself. And the Purpose Studio is really about this personal transformation, and how it then, from this place, how we're able to help shape culture and community and really drive the impact. Because I think what's been missing from this the social impact jargon, or even trying to do anything for the community, is this layer of it, right? We show up better in society when we take care of ourselves, when we have that personal accountability, and that's the starting point. People think sometimes it's overwhelming to address these really large problems, and to me, what's given me peace is like going back to understanding that the first step to these problem solving is us. We need to show up better and be better in our relationships, better with ourselves, better as a leader, and that creates the impact. That's the starting point. It kind of helps break it down, so I'm not having to fly across the world to do something. It's really like, what can I do today for me? What's around me right now? If there's anything else you just want to hone in about that community aspect, that team aspect, how this personal transformation really does extend out to the greater purpose.
People always try to change other people. Even you have a CEO that comes in and hires you because they want everyone else to change, right? Make them better leaders, or make them da da da. And real transformation always happens and starts with you. And to change other people is also dependent on yourself. Right? If I change, then the environment changes, because then I am now showing up differently. Maybe now I have more boundaries, or maybe now I have a better way of expressing myself, or I'm more vulnerable. And that invites people to be more vulnerable, or to change whatever they're doing based on what I'm projecting. If you want to change the world and if you want to change other people, if this is your desire, start with yourself. And then once you change yourself, everything else changes. And that's just how it works. So when we want to shape society, when we want to shape communities, and even in our own little families and relationships around us, in our teams, it all starts with the personal change. If I change the way that I am, those people, they'll adapt, they'll adjust to, what I'm giving off as behavior, as presence. And so it really starts with inner transformation. So if you are anxious about making these big changes and impacting bigger communities and people, like, just look into yourself and then see what can be changed here and now in your own self, in your own expression. And then that has a ripple effect and changes everything else.
Thank you so much, Vanya. This is a really wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me. This is really a lot of fun. You asked really beautiful questions and led the conversation in such a masterful way. So thank you for holding this container for us. And it was really a pleasure to be here today.